What do you make of the backtrack of President Tinubu on this issue of palliative 8,000 naira? He said, you heard what the Nigerians are saying, and for that reason, they are reviewing it. But if you look at what the NEC has come out with, it does look like there will be an out also, because they're still talking about social register. They will still give people, families or households money. We need to know the full details of their plan. But when they're talking about social register, it does still look to me that we are still going back to what some Nigerians criticize. But in all of this, what are your initial reactions?
Well, thank you for having me in your program here. Well, I believe that at this time, the country, we have come to a near collective decision that the subsidy regime was a fraud, and it has been a drain pipe on our economy, and it has always served as a cesspool of corruption for a few rent-seeking Nigerians. Having said that, what this government has done differently was the courage and the boldness of removing the subsidy and being able to face the challenges that came along with it. But what was unfortunate and wrongly done was the fact that there are supposed to be a clear layout plan on what should be done if this subsidy was removed. And I think we should also be clear, the past administration of Buhari never made provisions for subsidy. But having known that after the elections, when the winner was announced, within that space of a period, there is supposed to be a plan, a Marshall Plan, that there is bound to be consequences after this removal, and these are the plans that we have to tackle these issues. But it appears that immediately after the subsidy regime ended, then now they start thinking of what to do, and then the ridiculous idea of 8,000 naira came into the national discourse. And for anyone who is a citizen of this country or who is a close watcher of what is happening today, one knows that the idea of sharing stipend of 8,000, it's something that is, in fact, unacceptable and seems contemptuous when you put into tally the reality of inflation in the country and the number of people that will benefit from this stipend. So as far as I'm concerned, I have listened to the layout plan by the National Economic Council. But one thing that should be clearly avoided is that it's one thing to have a plan, and then execution comes differently. I have also listened to the presentation by the governor of Anambra, Soludo, and what he said should be taken very seriously. Seriously in the sense that the states are not equal. There are some states that are highly in debt. There are some states that have not paid the salary of their staffs. There are some states that are owing contractors. So if you simply give out these funds to state governors, they may not like to expend the whole money on palliative. They will use a portion of it for palliatives, while most of it will be used to address the problems which they have inherited. Many of these governors have inherited an empty treasury and pile of debt and contracts that are not being paid. So to me, if this is going to be very effective, there should be a separate structure set up in every state that will ensure that every kobo that goes to the issue of palliative goes down to the people. And we must avoid the mistakes of the last administration of sharing 10,000 naira, the N power and whatever. Where
you think that did not work?
Well, we should avoid it because...
Did it work?
It didn't work. If you look at it, it was meant to solve the problem of poverty. How many people were poor before the administration of Buhari, and how many people end up being poor? In fact, the money that was shared by Buhari end up impoverishing the people more because you have 133 million people that are said to be in deeper poverty. So I think if we are to get these things right, structures specifically for palliatives should be given consideration. And then the increase in minimum wage should be
Senator,
something that should also be done.
we understand that representatives of the World Bank was at our meeting, at the National Executive Council, Economic Council meeting today, and with what is on the ground, that money, the 800 million US dollars, the purpose by which World Bank has stipulated is for these conditional cash transfer or social safety net measures to help the poorest of the poor. Either Nigerians like it or not, it does look like there are plans to still give out this money. It is the money given to Nigeria by World Bank. How we're going to pay it is going to be our problem, our own headache. So if some Nigerians are criticizing giving out these handouts, but it does look like the government is going ahead with it because they're already talking about peculiarities of the states, and the states having their own social register. The plans are being put in place.
Well, what I want you to understand is this, that palliatives enough. Palliatives are not enough to address the problems of poverty in this country. Well, even if you go by the layout plan, you share 8,000 or 20,000 naira to a number of people, let's say 20, 40, or 50 million for a period of time. Then what becomes of other Nigerians that are not within that cycle of beneficiaries? And also what will become of Nigerians after the expiration and the money has been exhausted? So to me, I believe that palliative measures should have both a short-term and long-term issues. And the long-term has to do with the issue of increase in wages of workers, at the same time assisting farmers to produce food and see how you can do something about public and agriculture. So I think these are issues. But as for the World Bank, I'm not very clear if that is a grant or if it's a loan. And if it is a loan, if it's a loan, then it would be suicidal for us to collect loan and share to people, and then nothing comes after that.
Isn't it apparent that that's what's going to happen?
Well, if the government goes ahead to borrow money to share, then it's not different from borrowing money to pay subsidy. So as far as I'm concerned, because it will be better if such money that is being borrowed from World Bank is being given as a sort of support for businesses that they can grow. But if you borrow money to share, then after the 12 months or 1.5 years has expired, will you still borrow money again to share to people, or what will you be able to do? So as far as I'm concerned, I think the government need to get these things right. And then something we should also avoid very well is that if you give out these monies to state governments, there should be a break and a check to ensure that it's not only the beneficiaries, not only be members of the ruling political parties in the state and supporters of state governors. We must ensure that a structure that we have at the federal level is also replicated at the state level, that will reach out to all Nigerians that are available and then ensure that they benefit from this palliative. But if not, borrowing 800 million from World Bank and then sharing it to Nigerians, and then when it's done, what becomes of
the kind of scenario that played out during COVID, where there are palliatives and some of them stored and left to rot away in those people holding food items that should naturally have gone to people who are looking for food, who could not go to work, or wouldn't have jobs during COVID, were things that were nauseating, and one we ever thought that this should never happen in our country, where people are hungry, but you kept the food away from them. This food is supposed to be shared freely to people. But the question is, one thing got my attention, and you tweeted. On that tweet, you said, poverty used to be exclusively for the North. Now the government is making sure there is even spread and no section of the country is marginalized. What do you mean by that?
Available statistics from both local and global bodies have time and again reflected an index of poverty at a higher level in northern Nigeria than it is at southern part of the country. But it is clear that the reforms program that is embarked by this government is coming with consequences, and that consequences also has to do with poverty. I am someone who has been an advocate of uh, subsidy. We protested, we led protest, we joined protest for decades in defense of this subsidy. But at a time, people like me and others come to question that we have reached a point where government is borrowing to pay subsidy. So what should be done? And then the idea of subsidy should be removed, but there should be enough palliatives to address the consequences of subsidy. So as it is now on the ground, if you don't address the problems of poverty, it's likely going to spread. Most times when you ask an average Nigerian, and which part of the country is more impoverished than the other, I say the North. The North have more number of poor people. Well, it's a fact on the ground. But with the consequences of these reforms, if there are no palliative measures, if there is no immediate attempt to address the long-term effect of this removal of subsidy, poverty is likely to spread to southern part of Nigeria. It's not that the North is poor and the South is rich.
8,000 naira palliative can only get 6 loaves of bread at 1,200 naira per loaf with a change of 800 naira. What can 6 loaves of bread do to a household of 5? Is that the reality of our country at the moment?
Well, you see, most members of the Nigerian ruling political elites are disconnected from the realities of their people. Their lifestyle is high. They spend in millions and billions to maintain a certain lifestyle. But they don't have the feel of what an ordinary man in the street, not just in the street, even their security men and their own housemates are going through. So to them, they think that 8,000 can address the problems of poverty, which is very ridiculous. Whoever sold this idea to the president and this government has never meant well for the country as a whole. I think I was one of the first that simply made a sarcasm out of it, that how can a nation where people cannot even survive with 30,000 naira minimum wage be given 8,000 naira as, and I call it the Al-Majiranization of Nigeria, because if people will have to line up to be given 8,000 naira, which cannot buy anything, I think it is more or less to try to turn everyone into a beggar. I don't think this is the way out. And with the money that accrued out of the removal of this subsidy, there should be better ideas, more noble.
But I'm not sure the cutting cost of governance is part of the agenda of the next today. And they said they are advising and urging every strata of government to cut costs. Is that a reality that can happen? The National Assembly, the state governors, the state governments, and elsewhere. Is it possible? Do you see that happening?
Well, from what we have seen on the ground in the last few weeks, it appears that the appeal for sacrifices is usually directed at the poor Nigerians. Cutting the cost of governance is something that we have not seen any indication from both the federal and state level. And at the same time, it is time the president should also ensure that the rich also make sacrifices. If he is really determined to address the socio-economic problems of this country, I think it should be across board. You have taken over power. Be bold enough to do what others have not done. You have been able to remove subsidy, and the poor people are suffering. But there are people that have looted money in the last 8 years under Buhari administration. Go after them, retrieve those money. The cabal are known, the former governors are known, the former ministers of the government of Buhari are known to have institute probe and see where money is being looted and they retrieve it. But for now, it's only the poor that is making sacrifices and suffering. And there doesn't seem to be any indication of cutting costs of governors. Look at the convoys of the state governors, still the same. The presidential attitude doesn't show also cutting costs of governors. And you have seen also the budget with our colleagues at the National Assembly. These are all issues that need to be addressed. Let the poor see the rich also making sacrifices and cutting costs of governors on the side of government so that we know that everyone is here for the good of the country.